Hi, my name's Althea, and at 19 I found a lump at the base of my neck. I told my parents. They said I was being dramatic. For 7 months they called it anxiety, attention-seeking, just another phase. But I wasn't pretending. What hurts more than the pain itself is when the people you love the most decide your suffering is a performance. They told doctors not to scan me, burned reports, mocked me at family dinners, and the day I collapsed in public, they still refused to believe me. Why would parents do that? What were they trying so hard to hide? And how much damage can silence really cause? The morning I first noticed it, the world was still half asleep. Frost clung to the corners of the bathroom window like it didn't want to let go. I had just stepped out of the shower, steam curling against the mirror, my fingers massaging shampoo into my scalp when I felt it. An odd bump, small and hard, just above the base of my neck. At first, I thought maybe it was a pimple or a knot from sleeping wrong, but it didn't feel like either. It was deeper, firmer. Something about it made my skin crawl, though I couldn't explain why. I kept touching it as I towel-dried my hair, unsure whether to say anything. I wasn't someone who overreacted. At least I didn't think I was. But in our house, concern often got mistaken for drama. Downstairs, the smell of burnt toast hung in the air. Dad was already at the table with the sports section open wide like a barricade. Mom scrolled through her phone, eyes vacant. I took a breath and slid into my usual spot. "So, I found something weird this morning," I said, reaching behind my neck. "There's this lump." Mom didn't even look up. "It's probably just a swollen gland. Don't go jumping to conclusions." I tried to smile, brushing it off with a small laugh. "Yeah, maybe. It just felt kind of different." Dad peeked over the paper. "Let me guess, WebMD told you it's terminal?" I didn't answer. I'd learned by now that sarcasm was their favorite flavor of deflection. Over the next few days, I kept checking the lump in secret. It didn't go away. In fact, it seemed bigger, a little more pronounced each morning, like it was quietly staking a claim. I'd wake up before anyone else just to examine it in the mirror, hoping I was imagining things. But it was real, and it was growing. On Thursday, while we were unloading groceries from the car, I brought it up again. "Mom, that lump I mentioned. It's getting bigger." She didn't even blink. "Stop Googling stuff, Althea. You'll give yourself a stroke." "I'm not Googling," I started, but Dad cut me off from the front porch. "Are we seriously doing this again? You remember the ER bill from last year? $300 so some doctor could tell us you were anxious." His voice was louder than necessary, like he wanted the neighbors to hear. That had been last fall. I'd gone in for heart palpitations and shortness of breath. Turns out it was a panic attack. They'd made me feel like a criminal for even asking for help. This was different. I knew it, but their eyes said otherwise. That night in bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt like I was sinking. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was just too much. Again. I wanted to believe that. It would have been easier, but the lump kept growing. By the following Tuesday, I could feel it when I tilted my head, a small pressure, like a coin pressing into muscle. I skipped my afternoon English class, took the bus downtown, and walked 3 blocks in the snow to the free clinic by the library. The nurse there was kind. She didn't make me feel stupid for showing up. She pressed gently on the area and nodded. "You need an ultrasound," she said. "Possibly more imaging, but I'd start there." Her tone was firm, but not frightening. It gave me hope, for about a week. Then the bill arrived. I found it tucked in between junk mail on the kitchen counter, an envelope marked Boulder Health Services. I knew instantly what it was. My heart sank. I had used my ID, not the family insurance, but somehow they'd still sent it home. That night, Dad slammed the envelope on the kitchen table like a warning flare. "What the hell is this, Althea?" I tried to explain. "I just wanted to make sure it wasn't." "So you sneak off to some clinic and rack up more bills? You think money grows on trees?" "It was $75, I whispered. He scoffed. "75 now. What's next? MRIs? Surgeries? You think we're gonna foot the bill every time you get a tickle in your throat?" Mom watched silently, her arms folded, not meeting my eyes. He walked over to the fridge, grabbed his keys, and came back. Gas cards cut. Joint account locked. You want to waste money on drama? Earn it first. My breath caught. He wasn't yelling anymore. That was worse. The cold finality in his tone made it clear this wasn't just about money. Later that evening, I stood by the window watching snow collect on the streetlights. The kitchen behind me was dark. My fingers absent-mindedly touched the lump again. Still there, still growing. I remembered what the nurse had said about early detection, about the importance of not waiting. I thought about the ultrasound I might not get, the scan I might not afford, and how easy it was for them to label me broken so they didn't have to deal with me. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there until my toes went numb. Because that night, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit before. They weren't going to help me, and that meant I had to figure out how to help myself. I kept to myself for the next few days, drifting through the house like someone who'd overstayed her welcome in her own life. I didn't speak much. Not to my parents, not to my co-workers, not even to the nurse who called and left a message about scheduling the ultrasound. I didn't call back. What would be the point? The gas card was gone, and so was the illusion that I had anyone in my corner. Instead, I started writing things down. In a notebook I kept under my mattress, I began tracking every symptom. The ache in my neck that now radiated to my shoulder, the tightening sensation when I turned too fast, the way my head would pulse when I bent forward, like my skull was trying to shake something loose. I jotted down dates, times, things people said, my father's words echoing in block letters. Drama doesn't pay bills. The insult hadn't even stung anymore. It just settled in like a second skin. Marlena, my mother, began moving around me differently. She never asked how I was, but she'd glance at me when she thought I wasn't looking, her eyes narrowing. I'd catch her folding laundry slower than necessary, as if she was listening for something unspoken. The lump hadn't shrunk. If anything, it had become more defined, easier to feel when I tilted my head slightly. But I stopped bringing it up. I wore my hair down every day, sometimes layered it with a scarf. I got good at looking fine, at being agreeable, smiling when spoken to, laughing when expected. The performance became a kind of second nature, like muscle memory. One Saturday evening, as the last rays of sun streaked the kitchen tiles, I walked in to make tea. Marlena sat in the living room, her feet tucked beneath her, a half-empty glass of Pinot Grigio resting on the coffee table. The fireplace was lit, more for ambiance than warmth, but its glow flickered against the polished wood floor. "Althea," she said, her tone unsettlingly calm. "Come sit." I hesitated. Her voice didn't carry tension, no bite, and that made me wary. I moved to the love seat across from her. She held something in her hand. My stomach tightened. It was the report from the clinic, the printout I had folded and hidden inside my old economics textbook under my bed. She must have gone through my room. "You've been keeping secrets," she said, swirling her wine slowly. "I just didn't want another fight," I replied, barely above a whisper. She smiled, tight-lipped, hollow. "You've always had a flair for melodrama." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but she raised her hand. "You think this," she held up the paper, "is helping? That bringing more fear into this house is noble? Selfless?" I blinked. "Fear? You're poisoning this family with anxiety," she said, her voice flat. "And I won't allow it." She stood up, walked over to the fireplace, and without warning, dropped the report into the flames. I lunged forward instinctively, but it was too late. The edges curled instantly, ink bleeding away as the heat consumed it. A corner floated briefly before disintegrating completely. "You don't get to control this house with your paranoia," she said calmly, brushing invisible lint from her sweater. "One more stunt like this, and I'll consider it a cry for help, of the psychiatric kind." She didn't wait for a response, just turned and walked down the hall, her wineglass still in hand, like she hadn't just destroyed the only documentation I had. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind spun, not with fear, but with clarity. That lump wasn't the only thing growing. So was the space between what I needed and what they were willing to give. Sunday passed without incident. I stayed mostly in my room, headphones in, pretending to study. Monday morning came, and I tied a scarf tightly around my neck before heading to my shift at the bookstore. At work, I smiled. Told Linda it was just a muscle knot. Told coworkers I'd slept weird. Told myself I could hold it together until I figured out what came next. I didn't bring it up again at home. At dinner, I asked about the weather, commented on the lasagna, laughed when Dad told a story from his office. I played the part, and no one noticed the difference because I'd been rehearsing for this role all my life. But in private, I wrote, every night, I opened that same notebook, now stashed behind a panel in my closet, and added to the growing list. January 24th, sharp pain when turning left. January 27th, numbness in right fingertips. January 30th, Marlena burned the report. Witnessed, no apology, no acknowledgement. I scanned receipts, taped in the appointment slip from the clinic, still crumpled but legible. Even the voicemail, I'd saved it. The nurse's gentle voice saying, "We really recommend you come in for imaging soon." One night, while rereading the list, I paused on a single sentence and rewrote it over and over until the ink bled through the page. Next time they look me in the eye, I want them to see the ashes. By midweek, the tension in the house had settled into a strange, rehearsed silence. I went through motions like a ghost, quiet, measured, calculated. The ache in my neck pulsed with a steady rhythm, a reminder that something inside me was changing, whether anyone wanted to admit it or not. That Thursday morning, just as I was pulling my coat over my shoulders to head to work, Marlena stepped into the doorway of the kitchen, holding a garment bag with 2 fingers like it might stain her blouse. "Try this on after work. Your grandfather's dinner is Saturday. You'll need to look put together." I paused, my hand on the door. "Is this mandatory?" Her tone sharpened. "He's turning 80. We'll be taking photos. I expect you to smile." "I'm not sure I'm feeling up to it," I replied cautiously. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Then act like you are." I didn't argue. I just left. Saturday arrived fast, cloaked in fresh snow and a kind of cold that seeped under your skin no matter how many layers you wore. The house buzzed with preparation. Marlena had the kitchen radio on, tuned to old jazz, humming along while slicing lemons for water glasses like we were hosting royalty. By late afternoon, she handed me a long, wine-colored dress. It was elegant, high-necked, and clearly designed to cover my lump. "Hair down, no bun," she instructed, not looking up from the eyeliner she was applying in the hallway mirror. "And wear a scarf, not one of those knitted monstrosities, the silk one." In the bathroom mirror, I looked at myself and barely recognized the reflection. The fabric clung to me in all the ways I didn't want. My hair hung over my shoulders like a curtain. The silk scarf, carefully draped, completed the illusion. From the outside, I was fine, but my skin itched beneath every thread. We arrived at my uncle's house just after 6. The place was warm, loud, and filled with the smell of pot roast and candles. Dozens of family members I hadn't seen in months greeted each other with shrill joy and long, forced hugs. I found a seat at the far end of the dining table. The light from the chandelier above cast a warm glow over the tablecloths, but the nausea had already begun to set in. I pressed a hand to my stomach, hoping no one noticed. "You look thin, sweetie," my Aunt Marlene, yes, another one, commented from across the table. Before I could respond, my mother's voice cut in smoothly. "Althea's just watching her carbs lately." I stared at my plate. My father chuckled from the other end. "We've raised a whole generation of glass flowers. Can't even sit through a dinner without wilting." The room laughed. I didn't. Halfway through the main course, I stood up, mumbling something about needing the restroom. My head was swimming, and every step felt like walking through molasses. I turned the corner toward the hallway, and everything blurred. The next thing I knew, I was gripping the wall, trying to stay upright. "Althea!" My mother's voice hissed. A moment later, she appeared, grabbing my elbow and guiding me into a nearby storage room. The door shut with a click behind us. Her face was tight, controlled. You need to pull it together. I swayed slightly, my breath catching. I'm trying. I don't feel. I don't care, she said. Smile or leave. I will not have you ruin this family's name over one of your episodes. My voice cracked. You care more about appearances than my life. The slap came so fast I didn't register it until my cheek burned. It wasn't loud, just precise. My ears rang. She straightened her scarf, adjusted the bracelet on her wrist. Wipe your face, fix your lipstick, and get back to your seat, or leave now and don't come back. I left. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't wait for a ride. I walked the 2 miles home in thin heels and a dress that clung to my ribs like a secret. The wind bit at my legs, but the cold was easier to bear than sitting through another moment pretending I was someone I wasn't. 2 days passed before I could speak more than a sentence at a time. I stayed in my room, headphones on, letting Billie Holiday hum me back into something resembling calm. Tuesday morning, just after I dragged the trash cans to the curb, I noticed a piece of paper sticking out from the side of the mailbox. It wasn't folded like junk mail, and it didn't have a stamp, just my name, in shaky cursive. I looked around, no one in sight. Snow lined the edges of the sidewalk like a frame. I pulled the letter out carefully, unfolding it slowly. I saw what happened at the party, it began. I used to be a nurse. That lump's not normal. If you need help, knock on the green door across from yours. House 24. There was no name, just the house number. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from something sharper. The feeling that someone saw me, really saw me. I stood there for a long time, the letter warm in my pocket, my heartbeat louder than the wind. I kept the note tucked inside a sock drawer, wedged between thick wool and an old birthday card from my aunt. I didn't look at it every day, but I knew it was there, like a candle I hadn't lit yet. I wasn't ready, not yet. The week trudged on. Work hours blurred, and the lump throbbed with a dull, steady rhythm. I wore scarves daily, even indoors, claiming the cold bothered me. It was easier than explaining the truth, easier than facing the conversations I knew would go nowhere. Mid-February had brought a relentless chill to Boulder, and Saturday came coated in a soft layer of snow that shimmered in the morning light. I arrived early to the bookstore, keys jingling in gloved fingers as I unlocked the front entrance. The world felt still, like it was holding its breath. I stocked the cafe fridge, wiped down the front counter, then moved to the fiction section to reshelve returns. Around 10, light flurries began to fall outside the storefront windows, dancing between passing cars and bundled-up pedestrians. By 11, the headache returned. Not a sharp one, more like pressure, building steadily behind my left eye. I blinked a few times, hoping it would fade. It didn't. I reached up to adjust my scarf and felt a jolt of pain shoot down my neck. My knees locked. I steadied myself against the bookcase, gripping the shelf until my knuckles turned white. Althea? Linda's voice floated from the register. I'm okay, I called back. Just need a sec. But I wasn't okay. My balance faltered. The floor beneath me seemed to tilt, and before I could speak again, the light overhead fractured into 1,000 spinning dots. I reached for something, anything, but my hand met air. Then everything dropped out from under me. The next thing I registered was cold. Not just cold, biting, wet cold seeping into my coat, my dress, my skin. I was outside. How had I gotten outside? There were voices, footsteps crunching on snow, someone shouting, "Call 911!" Another voice closer to my ear. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my mouth didn't respond. I wasn't alone. For the first time in months, people were moving for me, not away from me, not against me, but toward me. A woman's hand found mine, warm and sure. "You're gonna be okay. Stay with me." The wail of the ambulance siren arrived like a lifeline, faint at first, then closer. The sky above me blurred, grayed, twisted, and then I was gone again. When I came to, fluorescent lights blinked overhead, and antiseptic filled my nose. I was lying on a hospital gurney, partially propped up, wires tracing from my arm to a monitor nearby. I tried to turn my head, but pain surged instantly. The lump was hotter than ever. A soft beep brought my gaze back to the side, just as a nurse entered, clipboard in hand. But it wasn't just her. My parents were there. My mother stood near the foot of the bed, arms crossed, lips pursed in that familiar expression of disappointment. My father stood near the window, speaking to a man in scrubs. "She has a history," Marlena was saying. "Emotional exaggeration. It's happened before." I opened my mouth, but my throat was too dry to speak. The nurse looked uncertain. "She collapsed in public. There's record of a prior clinic note recommending imaging." My father stepped in. "We'd like to delay further testing. She's had anxiety episodes in the past. We don't want her exposed to unnecessary scans without a second opinion." "I didn't faint," I whispered, barely audible. But no one turned. No one looked. Protocol held. I was listed for observation, fluids, and basic blood work. Imaging was withheld. They discharged me 3 hours later with a diagnosis of fatigue and dehydration. No scans, no answers. Back home, Marlena closed the car door with one firm motion. She didn't speak until we were inside. "I won't have another scene like that," she said, slipping off her coat. "Do you realize how humiliating that was? Collapsing like that in front of everyone? Again?" I lowered myself onto the couch, head pounding. "I didn't collapse on purpose." Her voice sharpened. "You're making this family look unstable. If you need attention, say so, but don't play games with hospitals." I turned away. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, I sat cross-legged on the floor, pulling open the sock drawer. I held the letter from House 24 again, rereading the shaky words under the lamp's glow. Someone saw. Someone believed me. And yet, I hadn't gone. I set the letter on the nightstand and pulled my notebook from the closet, flipping past pages of symptoms, dates, phrases overheard. On a fresh page, I wrote in capital letters, Plan B. Underneath, just one sentence, "They don't want me to get better." I didn't wait long. 2 mornings after scribbling Plan B in my notebook, I woke with a fresh wave of nausea that rolled through me before I even swung my legs off the bed. My balance was worse. I'd always felt like something inside was off, but now, it felt like my own body was running out of time to whisper and had begun screaming. By noon, the dizziness had escalated into something I couldn't fake my way through. I was shelving books at work when my vision began to tunnel. I gripped the shelf to steady myself, blinking rapidly, but the words on the spines blurred like watercolors. My manager, Linda, noticed immediately. "You don't look well," she said gently. "You want me to call someone?" I shook my head. "No," I whispered, steadying my breath. "But I think I need to go back to the ER." She didn't question it. By 2 p.m., I was in a wheelchair, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, being pushed through a corridor that smelled like sanitizer and stale coffee. My mother was already in the waiting area when I was brought in. My father arrived 15 minutes later, talking on the phone about a supplier delay at his office, sounding more annoyed about a shipment than about me. When I was moved to a triage room, I could hear them arguing quietly outside the curtain. "You said she fainted again?" a nurse asked. My mother's tone was rehearsed. "She has these episodes. It's always dramatic but never serious. She overreacts. Emotional exaggeration. It runs in the family." The nurse mumbled something in reply, then slipped behind the curtain. "You're Althea?" I nodded weakly. "Yeah. Dr. Chen will be with you shortly." That name caught in my chest. When he entered, I recognized him immediately. Tall, soft-spoken, glasses slipping slightly down the bridge of his nose. His eyes didn't skip over me like most. They landed gently but stayed. "Hi, I'm Elias Chen," he said. "Neurology resident. I'll be checking on you." He introduced himself to my parents with the same polite tone, but I saw the subtle shift in his gaze when my father interrupted his introduction to remind him we didn't authorize imaging. "Yes, I understand," Dr. Chen said calmly. "Let me check a few things first." Once inside the exam room, he pulled the curtain closed and gestured toward the bed. I climbed up slowly. He washed his hands, pulled on gloves, and began his checkup without small talk. When he pressed lightly near the base of my skull, I winced involuntarily. His eyes flicked up. Too much? He asked. I nodded. Dizziness? Nausea? Both. He paused. Do you want to speak with me privately? My breath hitched. I nodded again. Just once. He didn't flinch. Give me a few minutes. He stepped outside. I heard him politely ask my parents to give him some space for a neurological screening. It worked. Their voices faded, then the door clicked shut. Inside that room, with just the hum of fluorescent lights between us, he pulled up a chair. I'm going to ask you a few questions, he said. But his voice wasn't clinical. It was quiet. Personal. I didn't look at him as I whispered, There's a lump. It's behind my neck. They won't let me get it checked. He was silent for a few seconds. Then, How long? 7 months. He took a slow breath. You haven't had any imaging? They say it's all in my head. He didn't respond with pity. He didn't start typing into a chart. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. You don't need permission to be taken seriously, he said. The words hung there like a lifeline. That night, I was given a room in the observation wing, supposedly for hydration and monitoring, but I knew better. It was Dr. Chen who kept me longer, who entered an MRI request under his own discretion, coded for neurological compromise with progressive symptomatology. It was done in silence. No announcement, no parental input. The technician didn't ask questions. They slid me into the machine, head strapped still, the cold surface humming beneath me. For nearly 30 minutes, I lay motionless, listening to the clicks and whirs of the machine, the rhythm of data being etched into certainty. When it ended, I was rolled out, helped back to the room. They told me someone would review the results shortly. Dr. Chen arrived later that evening. The lights were dim. My parents had stepped out to get coffee. He didn't say much, just wheeled in a monitor, adjusted the screen, and turned it to face me. There it was. Even before he spoke, I saw it. A dark mass, unmistakable, growing like a shadow against the pale outline of my brainstem. He pointed gently to the edge. This is the lump you mentioned. I stared at it, heart racing. It's compressing your lower brain structures. That's why you're dizzy. Why you fainted. Why you're in pain. My throat tightened. You weren't faking anything, he said. And now we act. Tears slid silently down my cheeks, but I wasn't crying out of fear. I was crying because finally, there was proof. I looked at him and smiled, voice hoarse but clear. Then, let's begin. It was a Thursday morning when the message came in. I was seated at my desk in the study nook, legs tucked under me, one hand absently turning the pages of a neurology journal Dr. Chen had flagged for my review. My highlighter hovered over a section on vestibular migraines, something about diagnostic overlap, and I was just starting to make margin notes when my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. Background noise. Then it buzzed again. Longer this time. A voice memo. The sender, Noor, my younger cousin. 16, maybe 17 now. She never messaged without a reason. Noor existed on the edge of family drama, close enough to see it, distant enough not to drown in it. And that distance gave her something I'd learned to value: perspective. I reached for the phone, flipped it over, and tapped play. At first, all I heard was ambient chatter, silverware clinking, laughter from another room. Then, layered beneath the noise, I heard something else. A voice. Familiar, sharp. Unmistakably hers. My mother. If you let her think it's real, it becomes real. The words came wrapped in sugar-laced condescension. Controlled. Rehearsed. The tone she reserved for dinner parties and backhanded concern. Then another voice. Male. Smirking in its cadence. Griffin, my uncle. She thinks she has a tumor now. Next week it'll be a heart condition. Laughter followed. Light, unbothered, cruel. I sat still, not stunned, not shocked. Just very, very still. The audio ended, but it kept ringing in my ears like something that refused to die quietly. And the strangest part? I didn't cry. Not this time. I played it again. Slower. Pausing between sentences, letting each word sink in, not because I didn't understand what they were saying, but because I finally did. Because there was no ambiguity here, no margin left for misinterpretation, no cushion of benefit of the doubt. They hadn't misunderstood me. They had denied me. I forwarded the file to Dr. Chen within minutes, then to Reina, my patient advocate at the hospital. I didn't include commentary. I didn't ask for their take. I just sent it, because I didn't need validation. I needed them to see what I'd been up against. Then I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. Not faking it. Evidence inside it. I dropped everything. My MRI scans, blood work, diagnostic notes. Transcripts from my personal journal of conversations that had never made it into medical records. I uploaded the voice memo, along with the metadata. Scanned receipts from the free clinic I'd visited when my insurance lapsed. Email chains with dates and timestamps. My symptom log, recorded with precision, color-coded by intensity. This wasn't about begging for care anymore. It wasn't about pleading for empathy. It was documentation, for legal use, for protection, for proof. That evening, my parents showed up for my follow-up with Dr. Chen, uninvited. I met them in the hospital lobby, standing by the blue faux leather chairs next to the check-in desk. Marlena, my mother, spotted me first. "We'll come back with you," she said, already moving toward the elevators. "No," I replied. She blinked, confused. "What?" "You're not coming in with me." Her tone sharpened, like a switchblade suddenly unsheathed. "You don't make the rules, Althea." "This isn't about—" "You've made your statement," I said, steady. "Now it's my turn." She took half a step back. My father stood beside her, silent, unmoving. Dr. Chen arrived just then. He glanced at them, then at me. I nodded. He didn't need further context. Inside the exam room, it felt like something in the air had shifted. Not tension, truth. Finally given space to breathe. He handed me a paper from the hospital's legal department. A contact, someone for patients who believed they'd experienced systemic neglect. I took the paper and folded it once, then twice. I didn't hesitate. 2 days later, I met with Reina again, but this time, it wasn't just advocacy, it was a record. We sat in her small office tucked near the end of the hallway. The blinds were drawn, sunlight bleeding softly across her desk. Her eyes scanned the printouts I brought, the flash drive I slid across the surface. "They've deliberately blocked access to your care," she said quietly. I didn't blink. "This recording adds a different layer." I nodded once. Calm. "There's more," I said. "Everything's organized by date." She paused, looking at me longer than usual. "You've been preparing for this." "No," I replied, my voice clear. "I've been surviving. This is different." That night, I skipped dinner. I stayed in my room, the overhead light off, headphones on. I reread the transcript I'd typed from the audio, every word spaced clearly on the page, each sentence printed on its own sheet, front-facing, centered, not for drama, for impact, for truth. I placed them in a manila envelope, marked the front in black permanent ink. For the day they tried to deny it all. I locked it in my desk drawer, not for vengeance, for remembrance, for justice. At 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Noor, you okay?" I stared at her message, then replied, "I'm more than okay. Thank you. That recording, you don't know what it meant." Her response came quickly. "I think I do, but be careful. They're talking." I stared at those words. They're talking. Of course they were. I closed the chat, turned back to the screen, opened the audio file once more. Let it fill my ears, not to hurt me, not to haunt me, but to remind me. This was never my imagination. This wasn't anxiety. This was real. I saved another copy to an external hard drive, then another to cloud storage. I labeled each version with the date and time. Then, I pulled out a second flash drive and placed it in the box beneath my bed, the one labeled emergency. Inside were my medical directives, my ID copies, and now, this. I sat on the floor for a while, not doing anything, just breathing. Then I whispered aloud, not for drama, not for echo, but for clarity. Now they don't get to speak for me anymore. And I meant it. For the first time, I didn't need to defend my voice, I just needed to use it, and I would. Deliberately, irrefutably, unapologetically, one page, one file, one truth at a time. The backlash didn't take long to land. It rarely does when silence is your family's favorite currency, and someone like Noor dares to break it. It was Sunday afternoon when she called. I'd just finished folding laundry, watching steam curl from the mug beside me, when her name lit up on my phone. I answered quickly, but didn't expect the sound that greeted me, raw sobbing, half-choked. "They cornered me at brunch," she whispered between shaky breaths. "Your mom and Griffin, they said I doctored the recording." I sat up straighter. "They what?" "They said I manipulated the file, that I was spreading poison through the family, and my dad, he's furious. He said I embarrassed us." My chest tightened. "Noor, you didn't do anything wrong." She took a breath, trying to steady herself. "They want me to apologize, publicly. Say it was a mistake, that I misunderstood what was said." "What did you tell them?" A pause. Then, stronger. I told them, "You're not protecting a family. You're protecting lies." I closed my eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by a surge of both pride and sorrow. She was barely 16, and she was standing taller than adults who should have known better. "I'm so sorry," I said. "Don't be. I knew what I was doing." Her voice steadied further, like her fear had turned to clarity mid-call. "But you need to be careful. They're talking about getting ahead of this, trying to control the narrative. That's how they put it." Of course they were. After we hung up, I sat in silence, listening to the hum of the dryer. The same machine that had spun my shirts for years now sounded like a war drum in a quiet house. Noor didn't deserve to be the one taking hits for truth. But her courage pushed something deeper into focus. The time for quiet was over. 2 days later, just as the afternoon sun dipped behind the bookstore's awning, I stepped out from my shift to find Nurse Raina waiting by the bench near the bus stop. She wasn't in scrubs today, just jeans, a windbreaker, her hair pulled back into a loose braid. I approached cautiously. "Is something wrong?" She smiled, soft but serious. "No, but I have something for you." She reached into her tote and handed me a manila envelope. "I shouldn't do this," she said lowly, glancing around. "But I want you to have it, in case they try to make you doubt yourself again." I took it, hands steady. Inside was the full MRI report, signed, stamped, dated. The radiologist's notes were underlined. Mass consistent with prolonged growth pattern, likely compressing cranial nerve structures. Early intervention would have mitigated neurological compromise. At the bottom, in small handwriting, was a note from Dr. Chen. Documented history of delayed care. Patient presented clear symptoms. I looked up at her, throat tight. "Thank you. You deserve better than gaslight and paperwork walls." She left after that, just a quiet nod and a hand on my arm. But the envelope in my hand weighed more than anything else I carried home that night. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. I knew what it meant. That Thursday, I met with a civil attorney, Ms. Hannah Richter, mid-40s, soft-spoken, sharp-eyed. Her office smelled like lemon-scented folders and cautious optimism. We went through everything, the scans, the dates, the recordings, my timeline, Noor's memo, the MRI copy. She flipped through it with a practiced grace. Then she looked at me. "This isn't just delayed care. This is obstruction. This qualifies under medical neglect." I nodded. "I know. Do you want to pursue it formally?" I paused for just a second. "Yes." Later that night, I ate dinner at the same table as always. Marlena passed the salt. My father commented on the March weather, how unpredictable it was lately. They didn't ask about my health, didn't mention Noor, pretended the foundation wasn't crumbling beneath them. I played along. I smiled, nodded, asked about the weekend, but something had shifted. The way I sat taller, the way I looked them in the eye, the way I no longer flinched when silence filled the room. I wasn't afraid of it anymore, because now I understood its shape. Silence wasn't neutral, it was complicit. When they retreated to their nightly routine, television, wine, scrolling on separate devices, I returned to my room. I opened my laptop, double-checked every file, uploaded the final draft of the complaint. My hands didn't shake. I hovered over the submit button for only a breath. Then I clicked. The screen refreshed. Confirmation. Filed. Documented. Official. I closed the lid, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to the quiet. You thought silence was protection. Let's see how it defends you now. The following Tuesday morning, I was folding receipts from my latest appointment into my planner when the television caught my eye. The volume was low, barely above the hum of the heater. But the words running across the screen landed harder than any shout. Up next on Heart of the Family, a courageous couple helping their daughter overcome health anxiety with tough love. I froze, fingers still gripping a receipt. The teaser clip rolled. There they were. Marlena, camera ready in her signature lavender blouse, smiled tightly as she sat beside Griffin, whose voice carried that same casual superiority I remembered from every uncomfortable holiday dinner. I'm not saying parenting's easy, he chuckled, but sometimes love means saying, enough. You can't let fear rule a household. Then Marlena, with a faux gentle nod, we helped our daughter overcome medical anxiety through structure, through boundaries, through refusing to validate hysteria. I didn't realize I'd stood up until my chair scraped the floor behind me. My chest felt hollow. The air was suddenly thicker than it had been a moment ago. I turned the volume down completely. I didn't need to hear more. I'd heard enough lies to recognize them in any volume. They weren't content with discrediting me behind closed doors anymore. Now, they were packaging it for broadcast, using my trauma as a family branding opportunity. By mid-afternoon, the clip had made the rounds online. My cousin Noor sent me a screen-recorded version with 3 words. They're doubling down. I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. Instead, I called Dr. Chen. He picked up after 2 rings. I saw it, he said, before I could even introduce myself. Don't speak to the press. We'll handle this. I'm not going on TV, I said, but I'm not staying quiet either. He was silent for a beat, then, understood. That night, in a quiet corner of Raina's office, I watched her slide a sealed envelope across the table. No return address, she said. We were told to deliver it to the producers directly. I opened it. Inside was everything, clean and precise. A copy of my MRI scans, a notarized letter from Dr. Chen outlining the timeline of ignored symptoms, my original voice recording, screenshots of appointment rejections, the formal legal complaint. We're not leaking anything, Raina added. We're correcting the narrative. At 10:30 the next morning, the talk show segment was pulled. A short statement appeared on their social media pages by noon. Due to new information regarding the content of our upcoming episode, we've chosen to cancel the segment. We remain committed to stories that align with truth, dignity, and medical integrity. By evening, their corporate sponsors had begun withdrawing. The production team issued a follow-up apology, not to me by name, but to those whose experiences were misrepresented in the preparation of this broadcast. Marlena and Griffin disappeared from the media almost instantly. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the invisible one. And yet, I didn't gloat. I didn't post screen captures or rush to interviews. I didn't even reply to the dozens of messages Noor forwarded me from distant relatives, some apologizing, others still spewing denial. Instead, I wrote, That Thursday, I published an open letter online titled, I Wasn't Faking It. It wasn't flashy. Just my voice, in my words. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I described the slow ache of being disbelieved, the erosion of self-worth when your body is screaming and the people meant to protect you cover their ears. I explained what it meant to grow up learning that illness equals weakness, that help is conditional, and that silence is safer than truth, until it isn't. Within 2 days, it had over 70,000 shares. Young people sent me their own journal entries. Parents wrote that they'd reevaluated how they'd handled their children's health fears. A few nurses and therapists reached out, thanking me for helping them see the signs they'd missed. I didn't respond to everyone. I couldn't, but I read each one, often with trembling hands. It wasn't vindication I wanted, it was acknowledgement. And now, I had it. A week later, I stood outside House 24, the same green-doored bungalow where a stranger had once slipped me a note that started this whole second life. In my hands was a folder. Inside, blueprints, a proposal, the official approval letter for a new nonprofit. One designed to support youth who'd been denied medical care by family, intentionally or through neglect. We were calling it the Second Voice Foundation, because for people like me, the first voice was often dismissed, and sometimes the second one saves your life. The folding chairs were arranged in neat rows beneath the low amber glow of the overhead lights. Each seat held a simple trifold program, printed on thick ivory cardstock with a charcoal serif font that read, The Second Voice Foundation, Launch Event. Beneath the title, a single line in softer script. For the ones who were told, it's just in your head. I stood backstage, my palms resting gently against the edge of the podium. My notes were clipped neatly, barely ruffled despite how many times I'd gone over them. I breathed slowly, in through my nose, out through my mouth, each breath anchoring me in the moment. Not rehearsed, not postured, just present. Raina adjusted the microphone for the final time, her eyes scanning my face like a mirror, offering silent encouragement. She didn't say anything, but the nod she gave me held more weight than any words could. Noor was already seated in the second row, her posture calm, hands folded delicately in her lap, her expression a steady kind of focused. She looked older than when I'd first met her, maybe not in age, but in truth. There was a quiet maturity in her now that only comes from surviving something and still choosing softness. She wasn't the only one who had grown. So had I. It had only been a year, but it had felt like a lifetime's worth of letting go, of stripping away what didn't belong, a year of unlearning how to shrink and relearning how to stand, not just physically, but emotionally, legally, spiritually. The lawsuit had settled quietly in July. No cameras, no courtrooms, no final act to tidy it all up. My attorney, in his usual crisp tone, had called it a decisive outcome. Their legal team, not surprisingly, called it a regrettable family misunderstanding. The payout covered the remainder of my medical bills and the costs of launching the nonprofit, filing, licensing, early overhead. It wasn't hush money, it was seed money, and I refused to let it be framed as anything less. I hadn't attended the final mediation. I'd made the choice not to sit through another conversation where the truth was treated like something negotiable. I didn't want to be in another room where the word integrity meant something different depending on who was speaking. There was no apology, not a single call, letter, or message from any of them since the day the segment was pulled from the air. Months ago, their lawyer sent a sterile, single-sentence email. They did what they believed was right. I never responded. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I knew that saying it would hand them closure they hadn't earned. I had stopped performing grief for people who only showed up to audit it. Now I lived alone in a small, sun-worn studio apartment a few blocks from downtown Boulder. The elevator rarely worked, and the windows didn't close all the way, so the winter breeze came in like a tenant. But it was mine. Quiet, unassuming, safe. A place where the sound of footsteps outside the door didn't make my breath catch. My left ear was gone, functionally, at least. The doctors called it profound hearing loss, which was their polite way of saying irreversible. The mild vertigo still came and went in waves, especially if I stood too quickly or turned too sharply, but I'd learned the rhythm of imbalance, learned how to sit with it instead of bracing. More importantly, I had stopped hiding the way it reshaped my life. Tonight was proof of that. The launch of the Second Voice Foundation wasn't just a milestone, it was a declaration that I wasn't going to keep surviving in secret, that my story, and the stories of women like me, mattered enough to build a home for them in the world. I peeked out from behind the curtain once more. In the front row sat a woman with shoulder-length silver hair. She raised her hand slightly when she saw me, offering a gentle wave. House 24. That's what she'd called the shelter when she introduced herself the night she sat beside me in silence, back when the world felt uninhabitable. I still didn't know her name. She'd never asked for thanks. She was simply there, then and now. I caught Noor's gaze. She gave me two exaggerated thumbs up and a bright grin that loosened my chest. I smiled back, the air finally making its way in again. A volunteer handed me a glass of water. I accepted it with a quiet nod, took one small sip, and then stepped forward just as the lights dimmed. There was no music, no staged fanfare, just silence. And me. I walked to the podium and didn't read from the full speech I'd written. The cards were there, clipped and ready, but I barely glanced at them. My voice knew where it needed to go. "I'm not a survivor because I fought back," I said, each word clear in the hush. "I'm a survivor because I stopped waiting for permission to exist." That was it. That was all. The room didn't erupt into applause right away. Instead, a long, sacred silence held us all in place. And then, gradually, one by one, the room stood. Not for show, not out of politeness, but out of recognition, understanding, solidarity. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The moment was already complete. As I stepped back to my seat, Noor leaned toward me and whispered, "You were always meant to do this." Later that week, I took a short trip by myself, just a packed lunch, a journal, and a worn-out backpack. I parked near a trail I hadn't walked since I was a teenager, the one that twisted through the hills north of town and ended at a lake so still it once felt like a secret. Back then, I used to ride my bike here after school, before the noise began, before the world started handing out scars like they were keepsakes. I reached the lake by mid-afternoon. The breeze was cool but kind. The water glistened under a sky that didn't seem to remember what I'd survived. I stood at the shoreline for a long time. The scar behind my left ear caught the wind. I reached up, fingertips grazing the skin. It was smooth now, more memory than injury. I didn't think about courtrooms, or talk shows, or the echo of diagnostic machines. I thought about silence, the one I used to fill with apologies and second guesses, and the voice I'd grown in its place. A voice that didn't need to be loud to be true. A voice I now lived out loud. I still carry the wound, but it no longer tells the story. I do. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect us become the very ones we need protection from. And when truth is ignored long enough, it doesn't disappear. It becomes louder, sharper, undeniable. Have you ever been dismissed when you were trying to speak your truth? Or told your pain was just in your head? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your voice. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that reveal the quiet battles behind closed doors. Your story might be next.